Welcome, chess fans. It's time to have a look at what happened today in the highly anticipated Battle of Generations match between Pia Kramling and Liv Rosman, aka Gothamchess, that is being held in the capital city of Sweden in Stockholm. Today they played the rapid section of the match. So, as all of you know, the classical tournament finished with 2 points versus 2, or in the sense of the tournament score, 6 points versus 6. Levy was able to come back in the final game, although Pia Kramling flagged the theoretically drawn endgame. She was still trying to save the game, and now it was time for the rapid games. So they had to play 6 games with the rapid time control, and usually this is the hardest part because essentially you have to relive the same emotions not once but 6 times, so you have to make a lot of decisions with not so much time on the clock. Now let's check and see how did Levy play. So we're gonna not go through the entire 6 games, otherwise this recap will be about 3 hours long. Instead, we are going to focus on the critical moments. So this is the very first game between the two. Levy was playing the white color, and after the opening he didn't get much. So here Pia was clearly worried about Levy's idea to play f4, because you could perfectly understand if Levy will be able to play f4, e5, bishop c4, knight e3. This Laskova bishop is a monster. That's why Pia here played this very risky move g5. Now instead, she had to pick up a rather difficult move to sacrifice a pawn with d3. Now the point is that after knight takes on d3, black gets to activate the pieces. You see this pawn on b4 now is hit, and for example after knight e5, black can just take on e5 with a queen, a rook d4, queen d4, and white simply cannot win this endgame. With the queens off the board, it's just going to be a draw. Now what happened in the games that Pia played g5, which kind of makes sense, because after white's f4, let me just show it on the board, f4 takes, black can organize some activity at the king side. You see this king is pretty weak. So the idea was pretty interesting, but it was a very risky plan. So Levy played king g2, queen e6, and after knight e3 here already for Pia it was pretty difficult to come up with the next moves. After knight e3, bishop d3, you could already sense that here Levy was taking over the game. He had ideas like queen e2, bishop c4, try to target the pawn on f7, also rook d3, rook f3, and after every single spent move, here Kramling's position was deteriorating. Rook f1 was another nice move, so Levy here was trying to find ways to crash through at the king side. Queen a2, rook e1, bishop c4. You see here black has major problems to hold the position together because, as they say, the Laskova bishop, when there's a direct attack, very often feels like an extra piece. So the critical moment arose here when Levy played queen h5. Queen g4 was slightly more accurate, threatening to not only with f4 but also queen d7, getting the pawn on b7. So here we go to this final moment when Pia picked up the correct defense after d3 finally sacrificing the pawn, and after bishop takes on d3, queen c3, here Levy did not find the best move. If he had found rook e3 with the idea to play rook f3, queen f5, and possibly e5, e6, he still would have kept very good chances to win the game. Instead, here Levy played rook d1, and after rook d8, since the rooks disappeared from the board, here Kramling didn't really have any trouble to equalize. And even though a couple of pawns were traded here, Pia had an outside pass pawn. The outcome of this game was never in doubt, and it finished in a draw a couple of moves later. Game number 2 was a very interesting theoretical struggle, and both of the players were playing some sort of a cosbot version of the bishop b4. So here this was one of the very first encounters between the two. So Levy had apparently equalized the position after the opening, and here Pia, with a considerable time advantage, took on b5, which is understandable. Now Levy should have played a takes on b5 and still secure equality, but what happened here, he played bishop takes on b5, simply missing a very powerful response by Kramling. Now Kramling played a beautiful shot, knight takes on e4, and as it happens, here Levy cannot take on e4 because after rook takes on b5, as you can see, this is a pin, and white simply wins an extra pawn. After rook takes on e3, white can continue dominating with rook b7, hitting the knight, let's say something like knight f6, and for example, bishop e5, maybe first let's start with rook a3, the bishop e5, these are weaknesses, and if somebody is calling the shots, it's only white. Now instead of this, Levy found a very good sequence here, bishop c6, and now Pia fell for a very tempting move, which was not the best move. So she played this very nice looking move, knight g3. So the idea is that after rook takes on e3, she wanted to play knight f5, hit the rook on e3 and threaten with a fork. Well, actually here Levy could have done it, because after rook takes on e3, knight f5, he still has rook e6, and after knight e7 check, here plays the cool king h7. If white takes the bishop on c6, well, the bishop on d6 is under attack as well. That's why here this was perfectly playable. Levy played something else, but Pia had a very strong move, knight c5. The point is, she's hitting a lot of weaknesses, and after knight takes on c5, d takes on c5. Very counterintuitive move, but the point is, after rook b6, white is threatening to push forward this c pawn. The a6 pawn falls most likely, and black is desperately trying to stay in the game. Now instead of this here, what happened is that Levy activated his pieces instead. He found a beautiful shot a5 that deflect the bishop from this knight f5, knight e7 fork idea, and here after the trades, rook e3, eventually with a very active and precise play, Levy was able to secure a draw. The third game was a very interesting one. I just would like to show at least the opening part. So this was a repeat to one of the classical games. They already had played against each other. Queen c2, knight f6, knight f3. So clearly this shows that Levy had prepped this as a system and not just for one game. Same concept with a3, queen c3. White has the two bishop advantage, black is trying to be solid, and in the classical game Pia did play e4, which felt to be a risky choice, opening up the darks with bishop. In this game she settled for the more cautious move d6. Now here, instead of the immediate fianchetto of the bishop on g3 and bishop g2, Levy did play the correct move b4, bishop b2, and then basically decide what to do with the last square bishop. After rook e8, e3, b6, bishop e2, c5, white had definitely a small edge. But the critical moment arose right after the opening, because after rook e1 and d4, which maybe was not really necessary to rush so quickly, here after knight e4, knight g5, Levy was a bit confused. So he didn't really figure out how to properly defend against the knight takes on f3 threat, or he played a really strange move, b takes on c5, that I cannot possibly explain. Even I think d5 made more sense to close the bishop and deal with knight f3 with bishop takes on f3, but the correct move was knight takes on g5, queen g5 and bishop f1. It looks a bit scary. Black can put the bishop on f3, but it's still not a mate. White can always play king h1, maybe followed by f3, and white is perfectly safe. Now instead what happened here is that b takes on c5 was played, knight f3, g takes on f3, and after b takes on c5, here Pia crumbling was just much better with the black color, because the white king is so weak, and black of course will keep the queens on the board. After the trade, knight takes on d5 was the wrong approach, because definitely crumbling should have kept more pieces on the board, and eventually here Levy was able to equalize with the great move queen e4 and activating the pieces. Now I'll just go to the critical moment in the very far end of the game, where the game was ultimately decided. Here after rook h4, Levy already had conquered the 7th rank, so he was desperately looking for ways to activate his rook. Now he was down a pawn, but he was very active, and here came the critical moment. Now here Pia had 4 minutes on the clock versus Levy's 49 seconds, so she definitely had time to figure out how to deal with this 7th rank weakness, and the correct move was either rook c1 or rook d1 check, let's say king g2, and just go here. The point is, this check looks very scary, even there's a double check on g7, but the point is, black is threatening with a mate on the board. And by the way, remember this sequence, because this is going to be important later. Now instead here, after king g8, white has to force a draw with rook g7, king h8, and again white cannot do nothing, white cannot escape with the king, because this this is a deadly idea. Instead, what happened here, Pia played rook g8, and now she suddenly found herself in a very terrible endgame where Levy has cut off the king here on the 7th rank with a pass pawn, and he won the game in a nice fashion. So this meant that Levy suddenly took the lead in the match by 2 points. The 4th game that followed right after this one, and again, there was only about 10-minute break between all the games, and clearly with every single tense game, Pia was getting more and more tired, and her opponent was definitely having more energy. So again, this was one of the typical clasped structures, very modern ideas that Levy was playing against Pia. Here Pia played a rather strange move. She played knight d2. That's a move I cannot really explain. I think here she should have opted for like e3 or maybe h3 to secure the dark square bishop on h2, or maybe just indeed a3 bishop d3 and see what happens. She played knight e2. I think she was looking for some knight b3 or b4 ideas, maybe even e4 ideas, I don't know. But here Levy felt immediately there's something wrong with White's position, and he uncorked knight h5. Now the point of knight h5 is that Levy clearly shows that he is geomaterial, because he knows that eliminating this dark square bishop is very important. So if White plays something like bishop g3, he'll just take it on g3 followed by knight f6, maybe g6 and bishop f5, and Black has absolutely nothing to worry about. Now that's why here Pia played knight b3 and tried to save the bishop, but now you see the point is after her move e3, this bishop is really bad. It should have been somewhere on g3 or f4, or even if possible h3 bishop h2, controlling along the diagonal. So here Levy could not resist himself to play f5, which is maybe a dubious move, but from a practical point of view, it really worked nicely. He could have just played positionally like rook e8 and play maybe knight f6 and knight f8. This bishop on d2 is bad, so Black definitely is not worse. I would just say probably even slightly better. But Levy decided to play some sort of a Stonewall-like Dutch defense, Stonewall-like position where c-takes have been included, and here Pia Crumling responded not in the best way. She played bishop d3, which is understandable, g6, and now she fell for the trick. She played h3 because it's very tempting to play g4 and try to punish Levy for his very brave play. If she can play something positional like knight e2, short castle, activate the dark square bishop. By the way, watch out for the bishop a5 trick, trapping the queen. I mean, desirably the idea could be knight e2, bishop b4, trade the bishops and then just dominate the dark squares. This could have been a different game. Now instead here Pia played h3, knight f6 and g4, which on paper is a nice idea, because indeed if Black is going to take on g4 and accept this pawn, you see suddenly the king that Black has to protect is very weak. Now the problem here, however, for White was that Levy has the move knight g7, and if we compare the safety of the king, the problem is that this king can never castle short. White already has committed to rook c1, and that's why the position will inevitably open up. The king for White remains in the center, and this means trouble. So here Levy showed the best qualities he has in dynamic game. So here Pia attempted to complicate the game with knight e2. Levy brought the queen in the game, rook g1 was a mistake, so Pia was still hoping she has an attack, although she should have been very careful already to survive this position, so Levy immediately charged forward with knight e4, bishop h4, asking White a lot of direct questions, knight g3 another mistake, as they say, typically mistakes come in pairs, and now follows bishop h4, bishop b4 didn't really change anything, and another move g takes on f5, probably also knight takes on f5 was pretty good here, or bishop f5, but after g takes on f5, knight e2, here White's position just collapses with knight g5, this pawn is under attack, and f4 is a huge threat that White cannot parry. So here Crumling's position just collapsed like a house of cards. She played bishop f1, allow Levy to play f4, rook takes on f4, now you see this king is immediately getting under a direct attack, and the game didn't continue for long. So here Crumling played queen e3, Levy played queen e7, checking the king, and after queen e3 found a very cute way to finish off the game in style. He played queen takes on e3 here, and rook f3, the second game in a row sacrificing a rook. Now the point here is after knight x on f3, here Cromley had to resign because after king f2, knight x on g1, if white takes on g1, then knight on g3 is lost and black keeps an extra piece. The fifth game they played against each other was a London game, so I'm not going to really focus on all the details because Cromley definitely felt that this rapid section of the match is not going into her direction. She lost 2 games in a row and she was desperately looking for ways to fight back. Here they played the London again. Levy tried to play one of the most popular openings that he recently released a very popular meme about. So here, apparently he did slightly misplay the position because now he fell for the same move, knight h5, he used against Pia in the previous game. So here the point is, again, Pia wants to kill this powerful dogs with bishop, so Levy had nothing better to do than to play bishop e5, f6 and bishop g3. So here, something again rather strange happened, and I believe that's very strong rain outside. Have to pardon me, hope it's not very producing loud audio distortion. So here Cromley had to play g6, bishop g7, short castle, and e5. So black would have a very nice position after the opening. Now what happened here, this was already the 6th hour of the match. Cromley automatically took the bishop on g3 and played after c takes, same idea with g6. However, now there's a major difference. After bishop d3, suddenly she has problems with these pawns. So already king f7 was necessary here. So Pia very quickly played bishop g7, which is very uncharacteristic for the Swedish chess legend. And here Levy sat for a minute and he thought, well, what is wrong with rook takes on h7? Apparently nothing. And here Pia realized that she had made a terrible blunder because obviously rook takes on h7, bishop takes on g6 is just winning for white. So she attempted to somehow get the game going, but Levy was just too good. He continued with normal moves, long castle, king b1, and eventually won a very nice game. And something like 20 moves later, Pia Cromley had to stop the clock. 3 victories in a row for Levy in this match. And finally, we go on to the 6th and final game of the rapid section. I was thinking actually that this game is gonna finish in a quick draw since Cromley definitely was already pretty tired in the match, but she decided to go for a fight. So this was the critical phase of the game where Pia was playing with the white color. She had secured a small advantage and she had to take an f6. Why? Because this dark square bishop on h4 is pretty useless. So after bishop f6, knight f6, bishop c2, white is slightly better. Now what happened is she played a4, trying to create a weakness here, and here Levy walked past a golden opportunity to get a huge advantage. He could have played g5, bishop g3, and knight b6. Now the point is, after the trade, white cannot win the pawn on b5 here because the back rank is going to be a big issue. And the point also is the following, that white's dark square bishop on g3 in these positions is pretty useless because here black is going to play knight a4, and the pawn on c3 is quite difficult to defend. So Levy made a rather strange positional blunder, knight b6, simply allowing Pia to take on f6, so which is of course what happened. After bishop takes on f6, g takes on f6, I think that what happened here is that Levy simply underestimated this very strong move a5 and not a takes on b5, followed by a powerful sequence by Pia Cromley, knight h4, anchoring the knight on f5, and here followed by f3 e4. So far, this was the best game by the Swedish chess legend. She was clearly controlling the game, made a couple of powerful moves, and something like 5 or 6 moves later, she was completely winning. However, something strange started to happen in time scramble when after Levy's h5 here, all Pia had to do is just play either h3 or king f3, keep a solid advantage. She decided to go for the mate. So she played rook e2. The idea is to play rook e8, rook g8, rook h8. Do you remember what I told you what happened in one of the previous games? Deja vu. There you go. Again, it's happening here. So Levy just thought, what is going on here? He just takes the pawn on g4. The pawn f5 is under attack with a check as well. So here Cromley played rook e8. Rook takes on f5, king g3, and here basically black has to be a bit careful. I think the most accurate move here is rook b5. The point is there is no mate. Rook g8, either king h6 or king h8, I'm not really sure which is more accurate. As you can see, the king always escapes, and actually if white is overly ambitious, white can even afford to lose. Here Engine actually likes something like rook f1 slightly bit more, and the game would have finished with a perpetual check. Now instead Levy here played rook g5, simply missing a super cool move by Pia Cromling here. The point is, again, direct chefs give nothing for white, but Cromling played probably the best move in this match, at least in the rapid tournament so far. King f4. You know, I've always been a very huge fan of these quiet moves, but actually the point of this maneuver is that white simply shuts the door for the black king to escape, followed by the checkmate on the board. So Levy realized he's getting mated, but he was gentleman to allow the Swedish chess legend to execute mate on the board. He smiled and resigned. So this means the rapid part of the match is over. Levy won it with 4 points against 2. In a tournament sense, that would have been it's quite a bit more. I think it's multiplied by 2. But anyway, it means Levy is in great shape, and with this rapid games, he has proven that he's definitely GM caliber. He is in a very solid lead in the tournament, but also I think we have to give a huge shout out for Pia. She never was backing down this match, even though she was clearly tired. She felt the games are not going her way. She was always going for a fight, even with the black color. So the match continues. There's one more day. Tomorrow there's going to be a blitz tournament, not like a blitz tournament, but like a match of 12 games. Definitely Levy is a big favorite in these faster time controls, or at least I hope that he has regained some of the lost confidence he lost in this very unfortunate New York GM Norm tournament. That's it. If you like this recap, please press like and subscribe to my channel, and come back tomorrow not only to watch the final day of the Blitz, but also see my final recap. Thank you for watching and have a great evening.